What's up, y'all? Shuffle, and today I want to give a quick review about Blazblue Entropy Effect. You've heard the first part of the name before, Blazblue. You might remember it as an anime fighting game that has been around for about a decade at this point, so it's pretty established and has some roots, but this is a really cool Metroidvania roguelite style game that is a spin-off much akin to Dead Cells. This spin-off is made by a different company, but it really does do the fighting game series justice, not just in the sprites, the voice acting, but also how the combat plays out. Even though it's a Metroidvania, a lot of the moves and abilities you're using are reminiscent of the game, as well as it kind of plays like a fighting game, with you being able to run certain combos against enemies, juggle them, and stuff like that. If you're familiar with the Blazblue fighting games, you'll probably understand that a lot of the story in the series is usually a bit convoluted and a little hard to make sense of sometimes, but in a good way. You know, there's a lot of intrigue and philosophical stuff. Entropy Effect is no different. The top layer of the story isn't really super special. It's got an interesting premise and a conclusion that you're kind of expecting with some choices you can make along the way. However, there's an underlying story that you have to get these things called phenomenon in order to fully understand. So if you're a lore type of person, this gives a lot of context to the world, introduces some major characters and stuff, and it's really interesting overall. The premise I referred to is that humanity is dealing with something called the Entropy Effect and entropy particles, and somehow amidst all of that, you are playing a robot that has to learn how to fight using the Blazblue characters and upload your combat data to some kind of Skynet level mega server. It will make sense when you actually play it, I promise. This is more just a vehicle to serve as the in-between and the roguelite stuff, as well as to give you a break between runs. For the game mechanics, a lot of stuff you would probably expect from a roguelite and a Metroidvania, such as randomized runs, different items that you can buy in the shops, or different power-ups you can get, different skills to use during the run, as well as platforming, traps, boss battles, and regular jobber type of enemies. The game has 5 different levels for each run. They go in the same order every time, so you kind of know what to expect. But the bosses that you can face in the first 4 stages are randomized. There's different ones, with the 5th one being the same each time. This helps to keep runs fresh, alongside you being able to pick various power-ups and tactics between rooms or through events. There are a lot of tools that you can use to defeat your enemies. Not only can you just fight them hand-to-hand or with skills, you can also knock them into traps and do a lot of damage to them. But most of the time, you're just going to use your character's natural abilities. Every character has regular, just button mash combo attacks, a heavy attack that you can kind of combo into at will, one skill for each character, but you can get more later on, but it's usually a special ability reminiscent from the games. Every character has some version of air attacks they can do if they decide to go airborne. Everyone gets a dash, and then everyone starts with a double jump that can be upgraded to a triple jump with air teching. For those unfamiliar with fighting games, an air tech is when you press a button to recover from hit stun and correct yourself. That way you're not in danger anymore. As you go through the levels, you can pick different tactics. These are skills that modify your normal abilities, and you can use these to tailor your build to what you want and find different synergies between them. 4 of them are probably something you might be used to, and those are light, dark, fire, and ice, meaning that if you pick ice, for example, a lot of your skills can either slow down or freeze enemies. Fire will burn them to death. But then there are 2 more that are a little bit different. One is Toxin, so you can do a lot of stuff where you poison enemies, it can spread between them, and it does a fair amount of damage over time and sometimes can just outright kill certain enemies. The last one is called Blade. This gives a lot of your skills and abilities the chance to summon literal blades and saw blades to attack enemies. This is also one of the best ones to combo with because, in my experience at least, it does have a lot of skill synergy between other types of skills like fire. There are a lot of combinations out there, so make sure to experiment, find what you like, find what works, and as well, you can look at the skill trees of each skill to see what synergies you can make if you find other stuff. While doing a run, you can get various buffs and debuffs. Some of these can be moderately helpful, like when your combo counter ends, you can heal for a bit, or some of the debuffs are pretty tame like that as well. However, there can be some crazy ones that are also annoying, like a debuff that changes it so every time an enemy is defeated, it drops a bomb that does some pretty respectable damage. These can be gained or lost over the course of a run depending on a lot of the choices you make, so you're never saddled with them for ideally too long, but if you finish the run, they will not stay with you. The last major mechanic for a character to talk about before we go on to the more in-depth stuff is potential. This is a skill that you'll see pop up periodically when you make choices, or when you go to a shop, you can see it there. And every time you get potential, it modifies the character at a core level. Some of them are generic but incredibly helpful, such as triple jump, which gives you access to air teching, which I talked about earlier. Triple jump is insane. It's pretty much a go-to for any character, and it's almost always good. Actually, I will say it is always good. The other potential things give you access to new skills. So if you know characters like Lambda from the fighting games, she has a lot of ways to summon swords and attack people, but she only starts with one. As you unlock more of her potential, you can get either access to new combos, so different follow-ups, different combo starters, which are really cool and fun, or you get access to new special abilities. The final major mechanic, and one of the most complex that I want to talk about, is something that really gives this game such a ton of replayability because of how much you can optimize it, and that is the legacy system. Legacy is the feature where a character at the start of the run can pick the imprint of another character to add to their skill set. They can't pick themselves, but they can pick two different other characters. So as you progress, every time you're like, wow, I had a really sick run right there. I did super well. I got some cool synergies. Guess what? You can import part of that to your characters forever. So even if you end up getting really far and losing for some reason, there is still something you can take home and add to make the rest of your characters powerful if you choose to use it. Every character will always give you a skill from their skill set. For example, with Ragna, you can get a version of Dead Spike that lets you regenerate a bunch of health. With Mai, you can summon tornadoes. Or if you summon like Hakumen, you can get his block and riposte feature. The next thing you'll get is a passive ability that the character has, and then finally you can pick two of the tactics they picked up on the run. These are randomized, but you can also re-roll them if you desire. The reason this feature is amazing is because not only are you trying to optimize your individual runs, you're trying to optimize your legacy roster. Being able to pick 4 tactics before even starting the run goes a long way into helping you get to certain combos that you want. For the art style, the presentation is very sleek, it's stylish, it's quick, feels really cool just interacting with the menu or even picking characters. And the art seems to be, it's really hard to tell these days what's a sprite and what's not, but it feels like really good sprite animation to show off the characters and the enemies. All of the characters are faithful adaptations to their fighting game counterparts, and their attacks and skills look just like they do in the fighting games. The environments are well detailed, but also not too imposing on the player, so it's still easy enough to see the enemies and move around, dodge stuff, and you're not always trying to pick stuff out of the background because it overlaps and stuff. The game does a great job in giving you not only visual cues, but audio cues as well as to the attacks or effects that are happening. For the sound design, it's really good. As I said before, the enemies have a lot of audio cues to help you pick up what's happening even if you can't see it. The abilities, the character shout-outs and stuff when they are talking, doing abilities and attacks, it's all reminiscent of the fighting game. The voice acting is great, and the soundtrack holds up. It didn't jump out at me, but it did the job. I really like the roster overall. There are a couple characters I didn't like too much from the fighting games, but I know that players like them, so hopefully one of your favorites made it in if you're familiar with that. And even characters you may not like, such as Kokanoe, I didn't really like her in the fighting games. She's kind of fun in this because of how her playstyle is. Personally, I'm really hoping this game gets some kind of DLC in the future and they bring my boy Hazama into this because I want to throw some chains and do weird, shady, shadowy stuff. There is an online play feature, but it's honestly not even worth exploring. The netcode is not the best, and for how fast-paced and tight this game can be, having any sort of input delay, even if it's a couple frames, as you know happens with fighting games, is usually a frustrating and detrimental experience. For replayability, there is a lot to be had if you enjoy the normal gameplay loop. You can always bump up the difficulty level. This is called Entropy, and as you are doing that, you get different starting bonuses to help make the difficulty a little more exciting. Besides that, you keep working on your roster and trying to score higher and higher amounts. That way, the legacy of that character is stronger when you import it to someone else. Alright y'all, that's going to do it for the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you're thinking down below in the comments. Have you checked the game out? Did you like it? Do you like the fighting games? Have you never heard of any of it and you're going to jump into this? I'd be really happy to know, even if it's just your favorite character, but definitely throw something in the comments section if you are so inclined. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.